It's a very pretty tree, but it's not even Thanksgiving yet. I am not.
I made that comment when I came in earlier today.
Oh, okay. So it hasn't been there for. I can almost sympathize with the folks who just leave the lights up all year.
Isn't that against code?
I'm not touching that.
No Christmas.
No Christmas lights
All right.
before Thanksgiving.
Let's get this started. Good evening and welcome to this Tuesday, November 18th, 2014 meeting of the Raymore Planning and Zoning Commission. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we will call roll. Commissioner Burke.
Present.
Commissioner Crane.
Present.
Commissioner Anderson.
Present.
Commissioner Fizer.
Present.
Commissioner Grodzki.
Present.
Commissioner Maisky.
Present.
Mayor Kirchhoff.
Present.
Commissioner Hanner. And Commissioner Faulkner is present. We do have a quorum this evening. We have no personal appearances scheduled, and looks like one item on the consent agenda, acceptance of minutes from our September 16th, 2014 meeting. And unless anyone has a concern about those minutes, I would entertain a motion to accept minutes as presented.
Mr. Chair, so moved.
Do I hear a second?
I second.
All those in favor of the motion to accept the minutes of September 16th as presented, raise a hand, please. 6, 7, 8. Thank you. And that is 8 in favor, none opposed, no abstentions. Nothing this evening under old business. And we have 3 items under new business. So the first item would be election of officers, and I suppose we could go at that whichever way the person making a motion cares to. We could consider the 3 offices, chair, vice chair, secretary, individually or as a group, however you wish to phrase a motion. Or not. I can wait you out. I would like to voice my support for Commissioner Crane as secretary, since that job involves duties that are handled through the day and consequently are well suited for someone who is
Unemployed.
well, okay. I was going to say retired, but, you know, retired at least from full-time job. So, Commissioner Crane, if you're willing,
I'm willing.
I would.
Unless somebody wants to run against me.
I would nominate Commissioner Crane for the position of Secretary of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Do I hear any other nominations for the position of Secretary? Formal motion, I suppose, or just take a vote? Vote. All those in favor of Commissioner Crane for Secretary of Planning and Zoning Commission for the following year, raise a hand, please. Wow, I got 8 in favor, none opposed, no abstentions.
Why did he sound so surprised?
So that takes care of 1 and leaves us with 2 more, position of vice chair and position of chair. I could be Audrey, you know, I'm trying
Mr.
to
Chairman,
behave.
I make a motion that the current chair and current vice chair serve again this next term.
Okay, and that's in the form of a motion. I suppose we could actually just take a vote on it. Are there any other nominations for the position of chair and vice chair? And seeing none, we have a motion by Commissioner Crane to retain the current chair and vice chair for the coming year. All those in favor, raise a hand, please. I'll have to vote for you, of course. Thank you. So that's 8 in favor, none opposed, no abstentions. And we will go on to our next item, which is acceptance of the 2015 meeting calendar. Mr. Carteret, would you like to say anything about this, or leave us to our own devices? That's
Just a few words. It doesn't take formal action by the commission, but I wanted just to present it to the commission before we publicize the calendar. Of course, the meeting dates remain first and third Tuesdays. We know there are 2 meeting dates that the commission cancels their meeting because this particular room is utilized as a polling location. So the election on April 7th and then the general election on November 3rd, our meetings will have to be canceled on those dates. There are potential for a few other conflicts if there's any special elections. And for the last several years, we have been canceling the first meeting in December, which will need to occur as well this year. That seems to be one of the only dates that works for the mayor's Christmas tree lighting ceremony, and it's very hard scheduling the room. So we have accommodated the event for a number of years, would like to do that this year as well, and I just note that for the 2015 calendar, I'll be leaving December 1st open for that event as well. But again, this is the calendar that we publish for applicants to utilize over the calendar year.
right. And just to clarify, make sure I'm right on this, so a joint meeting with the city council or another board can also take place outside of this calendar. A work session can also take place outside of this calendar, and we could, if business warranted, schedule a special meeting, I suppose, with adequate notice. Would that be correct?
That is correct, and our rules of procedure also outline the process for the chairman or a board member to call a special meeting. Yes.
Right. I'm sure it wouldn't happen very often, but I just wanted to note that with several of those dates already blacked out, that we do have options if needed. I mean, if we look back at 2014, certainly the caseload has been fairly light. We'd like to see an upturn, obviously, in the economy, but not knowing whether that'll take place or not, we do have some flexibility if we need.
We do, and I really do like to maintain the twice a month scheduled meetings. If we don't have business, we can cancel it, but that's very, it is very helpful in the development process to have that available. So we want to continue to maintain the schedule.
Well, I think between some training occasionally by Mr. Zur, Mr. Willerth, or annual reviews of things, GMP, for instance, whatever, I think, there are enough other items that we can kind of work around if caseload is high. Otherwise, we've got time to work on those. Right?
Yes.
Okay. Sounds reasonable. Commissioners have any comments about the proposed calendar? No? Looks good to me. So this is furnished pretty much to the applicants as well, so they know where the deadlines are. Or is it on the Raymore.com?
It is on the website. It's in our developer's guidebook that we publish, and then yes, I share it with any applicants that express an interest.
Okay. So if we don't need to take legal action on that, I'd say, unless I hear any objections, let's go forward with this as our 2015 calendar.
Thank you.
All right. Third item, I believe we have notes in the, packet. discussion of action items from the 2014 UDC Annual Review. And Mr. Cataret, if you'd like, I'll turn this over to you to start the discussion.
Yes, sir, thank you. On the agenda this evening is a discussion item, and it comes from a previous discussion the commission had when you completed your annual review of the Unified Development Code back in June of this year. And at that time, there was some discussion of of the status of the Unified Development Code, as well as some potential amendments to the code. There were some questions asked during the annual review, some items that staff was requested to do some additional research on, so we have completed that and are presenting to the commission for consideration this evening several proposed minor amendments to our Unified Development Code that we would like the commission to authorize the filing of a formal application. So of course this is not a public hearing tonight. We are not asking for action, but we are asking that the commission consider these proposed amendments and direct staff to prepare a formal amendment and advertise for a public hearing for formal consideration. Anytime that we do amendments to the Unified Development Code, I think it's a very a special opportunity for the commission because there's a lot of importance in even a minor amendment to the Unified Development Code, because it is the provisions of our code and the text in our code that staff and the development community utilizes on a day-to-day activity. So when we propose one of these minor amendments, it's typically because we have had a question or an interpretation that's had to be made, and we want to have clarification. We want to, if there is an issue that has arisen that the code wasn't able to take care of, we want to address that. So you'll see a few of those examples. If there was a need where staff had to interpret a code, we want to make that clear, so we are proposing a few minor language amendments. And there's a couple of examples where there were some conflicts in code language that we want to eliminate. So we've identified 7 specific changes, and again, these are, most of these were discussed back at your annual meeting in June. And so if it's acceptable to the commission, perhaps just handle them one by one. I have them numbered through here, and we can just, I'll go over one item for discussion, and you can provide any direction or clarification.
And I would like to ask, before we get into that discussion, I don't believe I have anything else in mind, so it's not necessarily a loaded question, but would this also be an opportunity if commission wanted to propose or consider anything in addition to these 7, would this also be an opportunity to do that?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
so sometimes one good thought will provoke another.
Absolutely. So the first proposed amendment specifically deals with the floodplain regulations for the city. And currently in our natural resource and flood protection chapters, there's specific language regarding development and planning of lots in and around designated floodplain areas. And currently our code prohibits any platted lots from encroaching into the floodplain if that lot is used for residential purposes. That prohibition does not exist for commercial lots. What we have are proposing with this amendment, and we being Public Works Director Mike Crass and myself and Ed Eanes, is to extend that prohibition to non-residential lots. So it would be, there could be no platted lots can encroach within the FEMA designated floodplain or the 100-year flood elevation within the city. So this would actually then extend that prohibition to commercial and industrial lots. There have been a few instances where we have had commercial lots that do extend into the floodplain. Of course, no building can ever be constructed into the floodplain itself unless there's specific flood protection elements in the design. But from a standpoint, as we look at our regulations, what we've done with stream buffer, what we've done with flood protection in general. It just makes good planning sense to not have any encroachment of any pervious surface or into a floodplain area. So keeping the lot out, we know then there wouldn't be development in that floodplain. So it seemed to be a reasonable item to request, specifically coming from our Public Works Director. And
Right.
so that's what we would propose with the first request.
I think it makes good common sense. I'm kind of surprised that we didn't originally include commercial and industrial lots. Do have two quick questions. I'm not certain, but it seems like the storage units out by Evans Avenue, when they expanded, didn't that platted lot, not the buildings themselves, but didn't that platted lot get into a floodplain perhaps?
It did, yes. Both their initial facility right on the corner of
Uh-huh.
58 Highway, but their
Right.
expanded facility, those lots were platted, and they did extend into the floodplain. And then part of the condition of construction of the buildings was to elevate the
Right.
pads of those buildings outside of the floodplain.
And so this change would prohibit that in the future. So my second question is, but an applicant with a current floodplain or whatever, would that applicant have the option of going back to FEMA? And I'm trying to remember if it's a Lomar or
It is,
whatever,
oh.
but
Yes.
that applicant does have recourse to get permission to regrade, whatever, reroute, and could conceivably repurpose or reclaim some land that would otherwise not be able to be platted. Am I correct on that?
You are correct on that, and typically on our commercial lots, what's happening is they're doing elevation certificates and not trying to necessarily modify the floodplain line. On residential subdivisions, the most recent one, Brookside 10th,
Right.
if you recall, when that plat came through, Brookside 10th, of course, residential lots are not allowed to be platted in the
Right.
floodplain. So what they have done there is with the modification of a culvert in
Oh.
the stream bed for the road that's going to cross through
Right,
that subdivision. They are making modifications to the stream, thus they're doing the letter of map amendment and actually modifying the boundary
Right,
line of
right.
the floodplain.
Another approach, I guess, would be common ground
Yes,
to be maintained by a homeowners association, but not part of a platted lot.
that's correct. And that's
Okay.
pretty typical. Too.
So
Yep.
it's, yeah, I just kind of wanted to double check and see what those options were, make sure I had them right.
And if we make this change in the code, of course, if there are lots that are currently platted that extend into the floodplain, it doesn't prohibit them from developing those lots. This
Right.
provision is really for our
Going
new
forward.
subdivisions.
Right.
Yes.
Any other commissioners have questions or discussion about this? Okay. Quick show of hands, consensus that this is a good idea? Yeah, okay, thanks. Mr. Cataret, if you would, go ahead.
The second request is in our sign code, our sign chapter, and it's specifically dealing with the height of signs, the way the measurement is done for specifically our freestanding monument signs. And what the proposal language is, it does not change the overall height of the sign, but we're trying to clarify how we measure the maximum height of a sign. And based on past practices, out of fairness to the development, staff has always based the height of a sign off of, the way it's currently by code would be the ground area where the monument sign is located at. What we are proposing, there are instances specifically along 58 Highway, where the road is actually a higher elevation than the lots next to it. So specific businesses, and I've identified a couple of them that recently came through. CVS is a good example, Golden Corral, where the typical elevation of the lot is below the highway. If we had a 6-foot-high monument sign measured from the grade of that lot, it may not even extend above the sidewalk or street level. The whole idea of our 6-foot-high monument sign is for drivers to be able to see as they're driving down the roadway. So we have administratively measure the side from the height of the sidewalk along 58 Highway, or if there's no sidewalk, from the pavement or curb line of the road. So what we're proposing to do is actually specifically add that language into our code, also provide an illustration that shows how that is measured. And again, maximum height, most of our monument signs is 6 feet, and that would be measured from the sidewalk adjacent to the property. And that would be, again, if the elevation of the lot is below the grade of the roadway. If the elevation of the lot is above the grade of the sidewalk or the highway, then we measure it from the level of the ground where that sign is placed at that time.
Yep. Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments about this item? Okay. Everybody feel like this is a good idea? Consensus? Raise a hand, please. Yeah. Okay, good. All right, Mr. Carteret, we're up to number 3.
The third request is in our definitions chapter. There are 2 terms that we recently have been utilizing throughout other provisions of our code. And 2 terms, the term subject property and the term undeveloped lot, not currently defined in our definitions. So we are proposing a definition of both of those terms. And the definitions we're proposing are the common interpretations and explanations we have given for those terms. So we'd just like to clarify that within our code.
I do have a question, and it's prompted by this definition for undeveloped lot. So I would make a distinction between a piece of property that has not had any infrastructure put in, no sewer lines, streets, et cetera, et cetera. To me, in some regard, I tend to consider that undeveloped, and once the infrastructure's put in, even though the lots aren't built upon, I tend to consider those lots developed. So if you see my dilemma here, can you make me more comfortable with the idea that the difference between developed and undeveloped is the lack of a principal structure on the property?
Well, I guess it's how the word is being utilized
Right.
in the context of our code. And the only areas we have undeveloped lot used within our current code deals with the installation of, for the most part, with the installation of sidewalks.
Okay,
Which is why I specifically get to the term principal building.
right. So in that regard, this definition is correct. I agree.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I was a little worried sometimes, everything we do seems to have a ripple effect. But as long as you're familiar and comfortable that's the context, that's the impact of this definition, then it makes sense to me.
And yes, and that is specifically why we wanted to add this
Right.
definition. Yes.
Okay. Other questions or comments? No? All commissioners in agreement with moving forward with this item, raise a hand, please. Okay, we're good. Number 4, Mr. Carteret.
The fourth request is in our home occupation section of our code, and specifically the area that deals with the listing of requirements to qualify for having a home occupation. A home occupation is allowed on any residential property within the city of Raymore, provided that you comply with the list of requirements we have for that home occupation. And most of the items are fairly self-explanatory. The basis of a home occupation, the fact that we allow it is under the premise that your neighbors don't know that there's an occupation going on in your home. That's the whole basis for our regulations. We do allow a customer to come to the home occasionally. We do allow delivery of items to a home occasionally. Things that you customarily see in a residential area anyways. But what we don't want to have be apparent is that somebody that doesn't live on the street driving down looks at that home and there's something different about it. There's something going on there that isn't residential in nature. And that gets to the, again, the requirements that we want to make sure that that individual that may just be driving by, or even somebody that may be, you know, within the neighborhood, doesn't realize a home occupation is being conducted there. So obvious things like no signs and things of that nature. One of the dilemmas we've had recently come up is we do allow, you'll see in the language, one of the items talks about commodities being displayed.
Right.
And it talks about no commodities may be displayed or sold on the premises, except those which are produced on the premises or are customary to the home occupation.
Mm-hmm.
What we've had occur recently is outside display of items that are associated with the home occupation. And what that's doing is bringing attention to the property as to why are these products outside, and they're being used as display and bringing attention to the property. So we specifically want to add, and it's really for code enforcement purposes, just clarifying again that if you have commodities products, you can have them on display inside your home, so a customer can come to your home and look at them, but you can't have them on display outside or store them outside. So that's the intent of this additional language.
And I think, isn't that really consistent with the idea of zoning in the first place? That you have residential zoning as opposed to a commercial or a high-rise in the middle of an otherwise single-family residential neighborhood. This is, to me, addressing that same kind of a concern about compatibility.
And it is. And, you know, a home occupation is a business, and so we are allowing a business in a residential area. However, the residence is still the principal use.
Right.
That's why we limit the square footage that can
And
be
the
used.
impact on the surrounding residences
Right.
is minimal, if any.
It is. So this is not a provision we need a lot, but as with most, I shouldn't say most, with many of our provisions in our code, they're there for a reason because they have to be there to allow us to enforce particular interests that we have. You know, we want to allow home occupations as long as they're limited, and this is an item that has come up recently that we need to address.
Any discussion? Commissioner Meiske?
Okay, so this is very subjective for a code enforcement. If I was, let's say I was building birdhouses and I wanted to sell birdhouses, but I've got 3 or 4 birdhouses hanging on the outside of my house. Am I breaking the code? I mean, it's,
Do you have birds living in them?
I'd say, yeah, probably.
You know, very good example. It is. It is
So,
subjective. It is
you know,
getting
if
to
I'm
that. It is.
doing something like a hobby after I retire and I want to build these birdhouses and I've got 2 or 3, I don't have signs saying for sale, but I've got 2 or
Correct.
3 sitting out. I mean,
When do you cross that line?
right.
But that's the way with a lot of code enforcement items, as we
Okay.
know. But yes, that's what we're getting at. And
Right.
if it becomes to the fact where the principal purpose of having those birdhouses is to display them, to let people know that these are all the different kinds that I have, you know, we may ask, we may pursue a code enforcement action and ask, you know, our city judge to rule on that.
Right. Now, Commissioner Meiske, if you were building boats instead of birdhouses, might be problematic to try to keep more than one boat in the basement at any given time.
My boat's in the garage.
If you move the boat outside with a for sale sign and you're building them, then I take it
Yeah.
we'd have an issue.
Well, but I know that, I mean, Raymore is a, you know, bedroom community, so to speak. There's a lot of retirees here. There's a lot of people doing little hobby things.
Oh, sure.
You know, and I just don't want to, you know.
No, I understand. I think in the times that we live now, with the economy having turned upside down at least once in recent past, you know, I believe we probably agree that any kind of a job is good up to a point. The challenge is, it becomes bad when it encroaches on a neighbor or interferes with their quality of life. That's the
Well, I agree.
that's the subtle line that is hard to draw sometimes. Mr. Carteret, so do you think that the proposed wording, you think strikes a good balance between giving code enforcement some firm code to stand on without being overly restrictive?
And I do, and I think, again, it's the measure of reasonableness, that the example that Commissioner Meiske gave. If we know that individual has that home occupation and produces that product, if that product is customarily found on a residential lot, then we, would err on caution and would allow a reasonable number of that product to be utilized, because you would customarily see it on a residential lot. If somebody makes outdoor furniture and has it outside, well, you would, but if it's that limit on what would be reasonable, which is the same thing we do, and again, on many code enforcement matters. What do you reasonably expect, and how far do you let that go?
Right.
But it at least gives us something to work off of, and because right now, we don't believe that you're prohibited from displaying products outside
Right.
if you produce them as part of your home occupation.
Okay. Commissioner Burke?
Mr. Chair, I had a question for Mr. Carteret. I was considering if you have a home occupation and you have a vehicle that's associated with it, as opposed to someone that has a vehicle for work that is obviously as a work vehicle with the sign on the side of it as well, but the occupation is somewhere else. Is there any language on either of those types of things, and how, if they have multiple vehicles for a home occupation, is it okay to have some in the driveway and some in the street in front of the house, or are those things discussed anywhere? Because I don't know.
There is discussion in the sign code chapter for vehicle signs. So, but typically, if it would be legally parked in the driveway or legally parked on the street, you could have signs on your vehicle, whether it's even for your home occupation or for maybe the company that you happen to work for. If the vehicle is being parked for the principal purpose of advertising a business, our code addresses that. But that's really geared more towards commercial areas, commercial vehicles, where they can't have a sign out at the road, so they'll start parking their vehicle out at the road.
That's what I was thinking,
Our
considering.
code does have language regarding
Well, and I think we've probably seen semi-trailers that look all but abandoned, and the sole purpose of the semi is obviously to have a sign on it.
And
I
our
think
code-
I've seen that in our neighboring city to the west.
Yes, and
In
we do not
fact,
allow that, and our
yeah.
code's very clear on that. On the vehicle sign, if the vehicle is parked in the parking lot where the commercial business is located at, we will consider that being that it's associated with the business. So we will allow it to be parked anywhere on the lot. You'll see Lowe's vehicles in the Lowe's parking lot.
Sure.
You'll see other businesses may park their vehicle out by the road. We know why they're doing it, but it's still on their property where their business is located at. So we don't consider that a violation of our vehicle sign code. But if I have my business and I don't have frontage on 58, but I park my vehicle on 58 in that spot where it's very visible, I'm parking it there as a sign, that's a violation of our code. So it's
I just thought, as I thought about it and thought some more, I thought, well, if it's okay for, my favorite heating and cooling guy to park his vehicle at his home, then if he decided to have his own business, then I think that would be perfectly acceptable as well, when now he's his own boss and would want to have his sign for his home occupation on that vehicle, just like the same, maybe, I just thought that would, and I don't know that the city would want to spend time trying to figure the difference between those different places out anyway.
because we allow a company vehicle to be brought home in a residential area, it would be no different than, you would expect to see that, and it
Right.
wouldn't catch your attention as to.
Okay,
So-
Well,
thank you.
and I'm not a lawyer, of course, but when I read proposed J, commodities, products, materials, or merchandise, I think the intent's pretty clear. It's not necessarily, it doesn't say vehicles or tools, I mean, it's probably
Right.
subject to some legal interpretation, but it seems relatively clear to me what the intent of that is.
Thank you.
Yeah, just other comments, Commissioner Anderson?
So I'm looking at item D in the, I guess, the new proposed here, and trying to find the difference between the two,
No outdoor storage of materials or equipment.
right? And
An
then
example might be if somebody is making, again, we'll just use the example furniture.
Okay,
So they would not be able to store wood product materials associated with the making of furniture outside. They would not be able to have saws or lathes or other equipment outside that's associated with the home occupation.
so is that covered in D?
Yeah, good catch. There does appear to be a little bit of an overlap.
But it says storage, I mean, yes, I have repeated the word storage down in J, perhaps we don't need that, but that does,
Storage of
D does not
materials.
cover the display of products that are completed.
Right.
So potentially could we amend D to include that?
Well, or take the word storage out of J was
Yeah,
kind of
just-
my
Yeah.
thought.
Yeah,
Either way, yeah.
either way.
Yep,
I mean, I think what I'm hearing, Mr. Cataret, is the intent of D basically is if I've got a sharpening machine and I'm grinding lawnmower blades and tools as a sharpening service, as a home occupation, we really don't want me doing that outside, correct?
that's correct.
And so I think that is covered by D, along with the fact that we don't want me piling up lawnmowers that are waiting to be worked on or something. Whereas J would be more like, and I don't really want to add the word finished goods, but J seems to address more that I've made these birdhouses or I've made these boats and I'm actually displaying merchandise outside. It's kind of like the perpetual garage sale was sort of how I read it. That pretty much what you had in mind?
It is, and it really was focusing on the display of finished products.
Right. So Commissioner Anderson, what was your thought? Do away with J and revise D, perhaps?
Yeah, it's very similar, and so, you know, maybe either remove some wording in J or somehow amend D.
I'm kind of leaning toward taking the word storage out of J and actually keeping D as it is, but certainly up for discussion.
Storage of material in both.
Right, right. So actually,
Outdoor,
equipment
outside.
is unique to D, material is in both. I
Outdoor, outside, so it's
think
kinda
you,
ambiguous
well,
there.
I think you made a good catch. Other thoughts, commissioners?
Would it be possible to remove the word, in J, remove the word storage and the word materials and leave everything else the same? Because then you
They're
you
different.
still have commodities and products and merchandise in J, but we're not looking at storage and we're not looking at materials that may have been covered in D. That,
I'd be fine with that. Mr. Cataret, so I'm not sure on this item number 4. This probably didn't have anything to do with city engineering, correct?
Correct, it did not.
Has Mr. Zur seen this at all yet, or will he review it? I know he'll review it again.
He would review it. I do not believe it has crossed his desk in the form that
Okay.
was submitted to you this evening.
Just a proposal, you know, we can discuss this further. among the commission, but just a proposal. I'd say if we as a commission agree on a general sense of direction, maybe we don't need to worry about every specific word this evening. We know the intent, and Mr. Zur will review it, hopefully for consistency and defensibility and all of those good things. So I'm actually comfortable, you know, we've got several options. Leave it as is, incorporate J and D and not actually add J, leave D as it is, and reword J, for instance, to delete the word storage and delete the word materials. Personally, I think I'm leaning toward that, but we know it's going to get another review. My thought is, if we agree with the intent, let's move forward with it, and we'll definitely have another chance, and we may even have some further suggestions from Mr. Zur as a result of his review.
Yeah, we'll consult with him regarding this and see if he has any ideas as well, taking into account the comments that have been made.
Yeah, okay. So, commission, is that agreeable? We'll proceed with caution on this one? Okay. I saw head nods. Yeah, Mr. Carteret, let's move on to 5 then.
Number 5 is a request going back to our sign code for just clarification. Currently, the wording of in our sign code is if a sign is allowed, a particular type of sign is allowed for a property, but it doesn't comply with the standards of that district. Let's say the request is to make the sign taller or maybe a little bit larger, which are customary. Our code says those requests come through the planning commission to city council as a conditional use permit. But again, the wording is a request to install a sign that is allowed, and that's what's key by this chapter, but is not in conformance. So again, the sign has to be allowed, and then you can modify the sign through a conditional use permit process. What about a request for somebody to install a sign that is not allowed? The way the code currently then would handle that is through the variance procedure. And I believe, as I've looked through the sign code chapter over the years and heard discussion by the commission and council about sign requests over the year, I've always felt that all the sign requests needed to go through this process, through the public hearing of conditional use and the city council. So I would propose that we clarify the code by indicating that in essence, a request to install a sign that is not allowed by the chapter or is not in conformance with the standards of this chapter has to go as a conditional use permit. So if it's allowed but you want to modify its size, go through the CUP. If it's not allowed but you want to have your own monument sign, you go through the conditional use permit process. And then item number 6 corresponds with this, where we're actually indicating a prohibition of a variance to a provision of the sign code, similar to what we've done with a few other chapters of our code, because if we don't identify it as a prohibition for a variance, then the applicant always has the option to file a variance to a standard in the code. So that's the reason 5 and 6 are both being proposed.
Right. Yeah. So they kind of go as a package.
They do
deal,
go
really.
hand in hand. If
Yeah.
you don't want to do 5, then we don't need to do
Yeah.
6.
That's kind of what I thought. Any comments about, let's just talk them both together, I think. Any comments about 5 and 6? Does anyone on the commission have concerns? I don't suppose we have any concerns about the Board of Adjustment taking offense at our taking away one of their powers.
I don't think so, and I can't recall a request for a sign that has gone.
Right. I don't recall, but then I'm not sure I would remember.
But it is it is currently an option. And again, what my understanding of it, I believe, and for us to put in our code that if a sign's allowed, but in order to modify it, you have to go through this process, inherently we did that for a reason. We didn't want them to file for the variance. We wanted it to go through the conditional use permit process.
Right.
So the same rationale could, in my opinion, is why I'm bringing forward this request. Well, what about if the sign isn't allowed, it still should go through some process, and it seems to me the CUP process is what we intended to do.
Okay. Questions or comments? Okay. Just one from me. I think I'm forgetting a little bit here. So, Board of Adjustment is or is not the same as BZA?
It is the same, yes.
Okay. Is Board of Adjustment actually the right term?
It is the right term,
And
yes.
so
It's-
when I throw BZA around, we know what it means, but technically that's not correct. Okay, thank
Right.
you. I'll have to stop doing that. So we're good with 5 and 6 then as a commission? Okay, thanks. Head nods. So number 7, Mr. Carteret.
Number 7 is actually a very minor change just for clarification. And I was recently reviewing a permit for an accessory building in a rear yard, and it seemed to me the language for accessory uses and structures in our code was a little bit unclear. What I'm proposing to do, and the intent with this, and there's actually a graphic in our code that I don't have included here. Under number 4, where I add the words "in the side yard area," the side yard area is defined by our code as that area between the front of the home and the rear of the home on the side. So the side yard, and it actually does extend, technically it extends to the front property line, but you have the front yard area, which is all the area in front of the home. You have the side yard area, which is from the front of the home to the rear of the home. And then you have the rear yard area, which is anything from the rear of the home to the back property line. So the intent of our code is for an accessory building, you can't have an accessory building in the front yard. In the side yard, you can have an accessory building, but it needs to meet the same setback that's required for the home. So that's why you typically, on our smaller residential lots, you don't see an accessory building in the side yard because the homes often are built to the side property lines. When you get to the rear yard, the accessory building is allowed to go as close as 5 feet to a property line. So in the rear yard, the building does not have to meet what is customarily called the side yard setback. So in most of our R1 zoned areas, the side yard setback is 10 feet. And when most of us think about that setback, you think of it running parallel with the entire side property line. But when you're dealing with an accessory building, when you get to the rear yard, we're allowing that building to be closer than that side yard setback, as close as 5 foot. That's the way the code has always been interpreted. And I just felt there needed to be just a little clarification in our code regarding side yard and rear yard. And I wanted to add the language in the rear yard where we're dealing with this 5 foot setback. So I'm not sure if I explained that clearly, but it was more just, I wanted clarification within this particular provision of the code. And I did, if you look at number 5, our code specifically does require if there's a garage or a carport which has a vehicular access, that structure needs to be 20 foot away.
Right.
So if you pull in front of the building, your car doesn't extend out into the alleyway.
Okay, and I was actually going to question that. I thought that was the rationale, so the question I had was this. I've actually seen, maybe not in Raymore, but I've actually seen a garage where the vehicle in the garage ended up parked across the lot rather than pointed front to back, where the driveway could swing in, garage wall could be on the back property line, driveway could swing in, and the car's not actually backed out blocking the alleyway. I think we would not allow that, but maybe it's open to interpretation. Have you run into that in Raymore?
I haven't run into it in Raymore. I certainly know what you're talking about. Even you know, in some of our more historic neighborhoods, the garage is pushed all the way back to the alley, and you enter in off of the alley. So in both examples, the garage door is facing the alley, or the garage door being perpendicular to the alley. I have seen, but not in Raymore.
Right.
But I added the words from the alley that, just for clarification for this particular lane, because our requirement currently is 20 foot, and I just
Right.
wanted that to be clear.
And I'm not actually seeing that 20 feet as a change. It just, you made it visible to me and got me to thinking.
Yeah.
So it was just a question. The other situation that I've seen in older parts of town, metro area, et cetera, the back of the garage is sitting on the back property line. The driveway actually comes in all the way from the street.
Yeah.
And again, I think by the wording vehicular alley entrance, I think that other situation I just described wouldn't come under this because you don't enter from the alley.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. It's an interesting, code generally should apply to any possible circumstance, but then there's always an exception somewhere, hence the variance
It has the variance, yes.
or the conditional use. Okay, so I could be fine with this as written, as proposed. Commissioners? Good with that? Okay. Mr. Carteret? I guess that actually kind of wraps it up. You've proposed some dates.
I can, we do have the opportunity to advertise for the December 16th meeting if that one appeals to the commission. I will say we do have reason to meet on the 16th. We do have an application to consider.
Okay.
So already have it's a final plat application on our consent agenda.
Yeah,
so
well, still.
that'd be a 3-minute meeting, but it does seem to be, since we are meeting, to be a good date if that's acceptable to the commission.
Right. Well, when I looked back at tonight's meeting with the minutes coming from 2 months ago, it's kind of like, oh, yeah, I remember those.
Yeah.
But, do any of the other commissioners have a problem with December 16th? Think that'll give Mr. Zer time to review and
Yes.
public notice, everything?
Yes, sir.
Shall we make a motion to direct staff to go ahead and prepare these formally?
That would be good.
Okay, can I say so moved?
Of course.
Do I hear a second? And was that Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. No, that's all right. Just didn't catch it for the record. So, motion by Commissioner Faulkner, second by Commissioner Anderson to direct staff to move forward and prepare this as a formal case. Is there any discussion remaining? All those in favor, raise a hand, please. And it's 8 in favor, none opposed, no abstentions. So, don't want to swamp you, Mr. Carteret, but at least we'll keep busy.
Yeah.
I think it's time for city council report.
I'll go ahead and start, and the mayor can add
Thank
any
you.
items if I overlook something. The last meeting, regular meeting of the city council was on November 10th. There were 2 reappointments made to our Board of Adjustments. 2 of our members, Gerald Jenkins and Tom Beekler, were reappointed, and on the Board of Adjustment, they're 5-year terms, so that extends out to 2019, I guess. We also, under consent agenda, accepted the public improvements for the Edgewater 4th phase of Creekmore, and this was the a phase of edge water that actually gets out to the peninsula of the lake. So some very nice lots. We approved the plat a number of months ago, but the improvements have been completed, and I know there's some anxious individuals that want to get permits issued and get their homes started. So that is now possible. Also on the agenda was the 6th Amendment to the Eagle Glen Master Development Agreement. Bob Jackson came forward. He's the developer of Eagle Glen. He retains ownership of 2 of the undeveloped tracts in Eagle Glen. He owns what's considered tract 5 and 7. These 2 parcels are directly north of the Eagle Glen Intermediate School, across from the Manor Homes Apartments. Tract 9 is still owned by the Dean family. That is the tract that is actually located along 58 Highway and Fox Ridge Drive. So a large commercial tract that is currently owned by the Deans. Mr. Jackson came forward for his 2 parcels. His preliminary plat was set to expire on December 31st of this year. And his preliminary plat, again, just in essence, platted the lot as one large lot, if you recall. It has apartment zoning, has had apartment zoning since Eagle Glen was first proposed. But he did go ahead and preliminary plat that particular location for apartments, and then he had a small tract for duplexes, multifamily as well. With the pending expiration of that preliminary plat, and in light of our recently adopted amendments to our stream buffer ordinance, and in light of our recently adopted stormwater treatment provisions, we sat down with Mr. Jackson, who had, when he came forward with the preliminary plat, you may or may not recall, but he actually came forward with a plan that had some off-site stream channel improvements that were going to be done. So he really was ahead of the curve, if you would, regarding impacts to the stream. And Mr. Crass was instrumental in that discussion, and Mr. Jackson agreed to do some off-site improvements to the stream because we do have some issues downstream from this particular subdivision. So in communicating the request for the extension, we wanted to take his commitment to do those off-site improvements, which were directly in compliance with our stream buffer ordinance. He will be impacting a small stream on his property, and so making these enhancements downstream meets the requirements of our stream buffer. So we were going to credit him for that. But we also indicated that we felt with the new stormwater treatment provisions, he needed to step up and meet those requirements, because what would happen if we simply extended the preliminary plat based upon his stream channel improvements, he's exempt from stormwater treatment, and we didn't want to fall into that trap. So what we tried to do, and he was accommodating, is get him to comply with the new standard of stormwater treatment, which he agreed to do. And then we recommended his request for a 2-year extension to his preliminary plat. The history of other preliminary plats where we don't have these type of agreements in place, the council has been denying the request to extend them and allowing the plat to expire, so then any new development would have to comply with all of our codes. Mr. Jackson wanted to get an agreement into place that he understood what he needed to do, that met our requirements. We feel this does. He was asking for a 3-year extension. Council was uncomfortable with that, granted him a 2-year extension, which he was happy to get. And that would go on for second reading at their December meeting. So we think it was a win-win for both. We believe that he is compliant with our stream buffer ordinance, and he has agreed to comply fully with our stormwater treatment ordinance. So we think it's a fair trade-off and grants him his extension to his preliminary plat. And those are the items that I show from the November 10th meeting of council.
Mayor Kirkhoff, anything to add? No? Okay. That would take us on to staff report and planning pipeline. Mr. Carteret?
I have presented to you the pipeline. You can see the current activities. I will make a note, I don't say it a lot, but in our development activity section, we have a high number of homes under construction right now in Raymore. Residential activity has picked up. We saw it with last year. We issued 110 new home permits. We're very active this year. I don't know that we'll reach 110 this year, but we have a lot of homes under construction, and of importance to me is the number of undeveloped lots that we have available. At one time, that number was over 1,300, and these are lots that somebody could come in today and pull a permit on. So they're lots spread throughout our community. A lot of subdivisions had a lot of available lots. We have reduced that number down to 853, and that's even with Creekmore continually adding these phases. We're still able to reduce that number. And so I think that's an important statistic that we monitor and look at, and so I am pleased that we are reducing that overall number. And then regarding upcoming meetings, I indicated earlier that there is need to cancel our December 2nd meeting for an event that is scheduled for this room. We don't have any items scheduled for that. And then we will have our meeting on December 16th with a final plat application. And that application is for a development proposed. It's called Raymore Crossing. It would be a final plat for the Dean Homestead property there at Dean and 58 Highway. And then we would have our UDC amendment public hearing that evening. So those are the cases we currently have scheduled. And that's really all I have under department report.
Okay. Thank you very much. At this time, I'll open the floor for public comment. Anyone from the public wishing to come forward and speak, feel free and give us your name and address for the record. And seeing no one coming forward, I'll move on to commission member comment. Would anyone like to go first? Otherwise, I will call on someone.
No comment.
Oh, thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Commissioner Crane. Well, that sets the pattern. So, Commissioner Anderson.
Seeing that we won't meet for Thanksgiving is next week, I believe, so I want to say happy Thanksgiving to staff and fellow commissioners.
Yeah.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Pfizer.
No comment.
Commissioner Grodzki.
No comment.
Let's see. Oh, I'll squeeze you in now. Mayor Kirkhoff.
No comments tonight.
Sweet. Let's see. Commissioner Maisky. Oh, darn. Did that come out? I'll have to stop thinking out loud. Commissioner Maisky.
No comment.
Vice Chair Burke.
I just wanted to thank staff for going over some of the items that we looked at tonight. It's real easy to get something done and say, all right, we're done, we don't have to look at it again. But we continually grow and meet new challenges, so well done.
Well, Councilmember Moorhead has already made his exit, but I held this up if he could see it. If I may enter something into the record, yet again another article on urban chickens. This one appears to be a pro-urban chicken article, but it's from November 9th, 2014, special section to the Kansas City Star on Sunday called Green Life, and pretty much most of the front page, about half of it's actually photos of chickens, and the remainder is an article headline, "Chickens Flock to the Suburbs of Kansas City." And so I definitely, in our joint meeting with City Council, sensed some what I would judge to be some strong opposition to any further relaxation of Raymore City Code permitting urban chickens in smaller residential zoning. This article, and I have no intention of reading the whole thing, but this article talks about several suburbs and basically, my take on it is it's a pro-urban chicken article. So if I may, I'll just leave that to be entered into the record as yet another data point. I sense that we've not heard the end of urban chickens, or pygmy goats for that matter. But we will leave that for another day. And as always, thanks to staff, small but mighty tonight. And always acknowledge that we could not do this without you, and thank you for all the legwork and homework you put into our packets. So unless anyone has anything else to add, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Commissioner Anderson, motion. Do I hear a second? Second by Commissioner Burke. All those in favor, raise a hand, please. I think I've got 8 or 9, and so it is unanimous, and we are adjourned. No meeting on December 2nd. We'll meet again on the 16th.